These are some rescue missions that were so insane, I have no idea how they succeeded. Starting with the Gran Sasso Raid. In 1943, Benito Mussolini, the ex-CEO of Italy, was now confined on a mountain at Gran Sasso. His own country decided they were done with him and put him in a fortress with some Italian guards who weren't very happy to be there. No one was out to get Mussolini, and he wasn't really planning a big getaway either. He was just there, probably sipping wine or something. At the same time, in Germany, Hitler was going nuts. Not because this was a good strategic move, nor because Mussolini was critical to the war effort, but because dictators have egos that can't stand seeing their pals humiliated. He calls Otto Skorzeny, a guy whose whole life was about trying things that shouldn't work, but somehow he makes them happen. Skorzeny sees what's happening and realizes that the best plan is to fire a bunch of wooden gliders at a mountain fortress and just see what happens. So the operation begins. The gliders, which are just really big wooden boxes with wings, crash directly into the rough ground, just managing to stop before the edge of a cliff. The Italian guards hear the noise, turn around, and see Germans actually dropping from the sky. This was not part of the job description. They might fight, sure, but what's the point? Mussolini was not really their issue anymore. They shrugged their shoulders, set their weapons down, and moved to the side. Mussolini is just starting to understand that something's going on. He's been stuck in this prison, feeling bored, and now some dude is pushing him towards a plane that shouldn't be on top of a mountain. The pilot glances at the rough runway, bumpy ground that just suddenly stops, and instantly regrets not taking a day off. But there's no time to wait. The engine makes a loud sound, the plane moves ahead, and the ground begins to disappear. Finally, against all odds, the sky's ahead and they're still breathing. Insane. Baby Lily's miracle. There are some miracles, and then there's what took place with baby Lily in 2015. When first responders got to the terrible car crash in Utah, it seemed like common sense was nowhere to be found. On March 7th, 2015, a car went off the road and fell into the cold Spanish Fork River. The driver, 25-year-old Lynn Grossbeck, died instantly. Lily, who was 18 months old, was in her car seat, turned upside down and partly in the cold water. She was there for 14 hours. That's not a typo. 14 whole hours. This is the part where things start to get strange. When the helpers arrived, they heard someone asking for help. They say they heard it, clear and loud. But Lynn had been dead since the crash. A spooky voice somehow led the first responders to the car. After they turned the car over, they discovered Lily, out cold but still breathing. It was surprising that she made it through. It shouldn't be possible to survive that situation. The water was cold, there wasn't much oxygen. The entire situation felt like a list of things that could lead to not making it out safely. But somehow she managed to. They hurried her to the hospital fearing the worst, but just a few days later, she got all better as if nothing had happened at all. Scientists can debate cold water survival reflexes and oxygen conservation, but honestly, baby Lily just brushed off danger and walked away. No one knows where the strange voice came from even now. But no matter what, Lily's survival is one of those stories that makes even the most doubtful people look at the universe with a raised eyebrow. Next up is the Kursk disaster. On August 12, 2000, the Russian nuclear submarine Kursk set out for what was meant to be a normal naval drill in the Barents Sea. Everything was going well. Then suddenly things took a turn. At first, there was a bang. Not a little one, but a huge explosion that swiftly converted the front of the submarine into a fireball. A little while later, since one explosion clearly wasn't enough, a second, even bigger blast went off in the ship, making sure that anything that wasn't already ruined was now definitely cooked. The waves from the blast were so strong that other ships nearby could feel the explosion. The Kursk had sunk to the bottom of the sea, 354 feet down where it remained. Inside, a few crew members had managed to stay alive, stuck in the back sections, separated from everything outside. They had air to breathe, they felt hopeful, and sadly they also had the Russian government in charge of the rescue, which meant they really had no chance. The Russian Navy reacted in the most unfortunate manner. Initially, they said there was nothing wrong. They thought that if they didn't pay attention to the problem, it might just disappear on its own. When it became clear that something had really gone very wrong, they finally admitted the Kursk was missing. But they promised everyone that they had the situation handled. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Their initial rescue efforts were quite amusingly unhelpful. Their submersibles, which were meant to grab onto the escape door, kept failing over and over. Time went by, the stuck crew was still alive, just waiting. Other countries had given support. Britain, Norway, and even the US were prepared to send skilled divers and modern tools, but the Russian response was, nah, we can manage on our own. By the time they finally set aside their pride and let international teams help, it was too late. The final survivors, who had been in the cold dark for days, writing messages to their loved ones and wishing for a miracle, had all died. All 118 members of the crew were gone, and somehow things just kept getting worse. Russian officials first said that everyone had died right away. A simple story that might have worked if handwritten notes from the crew hadn't been found later, showing that at least 23 sailors had been alive for hours, maybe even days. They were waiting and just sitting there, completely hopeless. The Kursk disaster was a sad event, but it wasn't only about machines breaking down. It was about poor leadership, bad choices, and a lack of basic skills. Anyway, next up, the Halifax explosion rescues. December 6, 1917 began like any other day in Halifax. Everyone was getting ready for their jobs, kids were off to school, and the harbor was lively as it usually was. But within minutes, everything changed. A French cargo ship named Mont Blanc was sailing through the Halifax harbor. This ship wasn't holding the usual cargo of foods, furniture, machinery, and whatever. This thing was packed full of explosives. We're talking 3,000 tons of TNT, picric acid, and other stuff made to create large, fiery explosions. Basically, a floating disaster waiting to happen. And guess what? Another ship, the Norwegian Imo, was arriving at the same time. The two ships looked at each other and, somehow, with a whole damn harbor to move around in, smashed into each other. At the beginning, it was just a fire. The Mont Blanc caught fire, and rather than trying to extinguish it, the crew quickly left the ship and paddled away to save themselves. At the same time, people came together by the harbor to see what was happening. A burning boat, free entertainment. They had no idea that they were about to witness the biggest explosion caused by humans before nuclear bombs. At 9:04 a.m., the Mont Blanc reached its limit. The ship blew up with a power similar to 2.9 kilotons of TNT. And when I say exploded, I don't mean just a small bang. It was more like a bigger bang. The wave hit Halifax so quickly that many people didn't have time to respond. Windows broke 80 miles away, and a piece of the ship's anchor was later discovered 2 miles from where the explosion happened. The fireball soared high into the sky, making people think the sun had come down for a better view. And in a flash, the city disappeared. More than 2,000 people lost their lives immediately, and 9,000 others were hurt, with many stuck under fallen buildings, crushed by rubble, or caught in fierce fires. Whole neighborhoods disappeared completely. Train stations, firehouses, schools, destroyed. Just when it looked like things couldn't get any worse, the explosion sent a huge wave of burning pieces of boat flying everywhere, and now fires were spreading through the wreckage. Even with all the damage, people didn't just wait around for help. The ones who made it and could still move started working. Firefighters, or at least those who were still okay, ran right into the fire. Doctors created temporary hospitals and homes, churches, and schools, using whatever supplies were available. At the same time, train workers noticed the blast from far away. Vince Coleman, a telegraph operator, was at the train station when it happened, and he suddenly realized something very scary. A train packed with people was just seconds from arriving in Halifax, heading towards a city that was gone. Coleman knew he was about to be vaporized, and he remained at his post like an absolute unit, and began sending out messages. Halt the train, a ship carrying weapons is on fire, getting close to Halifax. While Halifax was on fire, another train crew did something that sounded completely dumb. They rushed towards the chaos at full speed. They just went ahead without checking if it was okay. They watched a city disappear and said, okay, I guess we're the first ones to help now. They rolled into the wreck, picked up the injured, and turned into a moving hospital. Now that's gangster. Just when Halifax thought it couldn't get any worse, Mother Nature survived everyone with a new twist. A snowstorm. 10 inches of snow covered the wreck, making it more challenging to locate survivors. It felt like the universe had set Halifax to ultra nightmare difficulty. But people wouldn't give up. They continued to dig, kept pulling people out of the snow, and kept helping the injured with whatever supplies they had remaining. It took a long time to fix things up again, but the folks in Halifax never stopped trying. They changed schools into hospitals, they worked in the snow, they saved thousands even though they'd lost everything themselves. They just wouldn't give up. That's why, even though Halifax had the biggest explosion at that point in history, the people showed they were strong and could not be broken. September 1st, 2004. The Beslan School Hostage Crisis. It was meant to be a joyful day in Beslan, Russia. It was the first day of school, so kids wore their best clothes, teachers greeted students, and parents snapped photos. No one saw it coming, but something very terrifying was about to enter the school grounds. At about 9:30 a.m., a group of armed Chechen attackers entered school number 1. They didn't come to check who was present, they were there to change a school into a war zone. In just a few minutes, they gathered more than 1,100 people, 777 of them being kids, into the school gym. The attackers had one demand. Russia needs to leave Chechnya or every hostage would be killed. The bad guys set up the gym with explosives, hanging them from the basketball hoops, the walls, and even the ceiling, with wires stretched across the floor like a trap. Any quick move, any try to get away, and that's it. Everyone's dead. The first day was all about mental struggle. The people being held didn't get any food or water. The temperature in the gym went way up, and anyone who cried or complained, the attackers just killed them right there and then. Sometimes even making kids watch. Outside, the Russian government was in a rush. Talks happened between negotiators. The attackers reacted by taking the lives of more captives. The government attempted to provide food and water. The attackers wouldn't allow it inside. 2 days passed by quickly. The Russian Spetsnaz, Russia's top counterterrorism team, was ready, but the government was unsure about rushing into the school. Why? Because the whole place was a death trap. One mistake, one wrong guess, and everyone inside would be gone. Then came day 3, and that's when everything went wrong. At about 1 p.m., 2 big blasts went off inside the gym. No one really knows what caused it. Maybe it was the terrorists or just a mistake. But that wasn't important. Fear took control. The people held captive saw the walls falling down and decided to escape, and that's when the Spetsnaz said no more. Russian special forces rushed in, shooting their guns. What happened next was a wild, harsh, and genuinely terrifying shootout. Bullets flew, the roof fell down, fire spread everywhere, and in the middle of this chaos, people were running to escape. The bad guys used hostages to protect themselves, making the Spetsnaz fight to save as many people as they could. 334 hostages lost their lives. More than 700 people were injured, including many Spetsnaz soldiers. And the bad guys, everyone except one was killed. The final survivor was taken into custody, and let's just say Russia was not feeling very forgiving. Next up is a pretty famous story, the Chilean miners' rescue. Mining is one of the scariest jobs in the world. You're deep below the ground, surrounded by a lot of heavy rock that could, at any time, flatten you like a pancake. On August 5th, 2010, that nightmare became a reality for 33 miners in Chile. It began just like any other workday at the San Jose copper gold mine close to Copiapó, Chile. The men were 2,300 feet underground, going about their work when suddenly, boom. The main exit got covered with 770,000 tons of rock. In simple terms, leaving was not an option. At the beginning, there was just fear. The tunnels for emergencies, gone. The radio, not working. The only way to escape? Closed up tighter than a jar of Nutella. The men were stuck in a hot, dark place with a temperature hitting 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 degrees Celsius, and not a lot of air to breathe. There were no emergency supplies because, surprise, the mine owners had never put them in place. The miners had to make their snacks last, which meant living on just a little bit of canned tuna, a small sip of milk, and a tiny bite of cracker every other day. And water? Oh, they drank water that fell from the rocks. What other option did they have? At the same time, Chile's government was really worried. Rescuers didn't know where the miners were and had no idea if they were still alive, so they did what anyone would do. They began drilling. For 17 long days, the miners had no contact with anyone outside. Hope was fading quickly. Then on day 17, one of the drills finally got through to their underground prison. The miners attached a note to the drill bit, a message that soon became famous. "We are safe in the shelter, all 33 of us." The world went a little crazy, news sources went wild, families cried, and the Chilean government began pouring funds into the rescue operation. Now, this is where things become really over the top. It was simple to get a camera down there. Bringing 33 big guys back up through a small opening in hard rock? Not so much. So Chile asked NASA for help. Yup, the folks who launch humans into space were now working on how to get humans out of a rock box. Their solution? A special escape capsule called Phoenix. This was a steel tube just a bit wider than a man's shoulders, made to push each miner out one at a time, through a tight shaft drilled through 2,300 feet of rock. The rescue started on October 13th, 2010. The first miner, Florencio Avalos, was secured tightly and shot to the surface. The audience went wild. It was lit. Cheers, horns, fireworks, the whole nine. It felt like Chile took home the World Cup. One by one, each miner stepped into the small metal elevator. Some were relaxed and composed, others made jokes, and one named Mario chose to give out souvenir rocks from the mine. After 69 days without light, all 33 miners were rescued. Everyone was accounted for. It was definitely one of the most amazing survival stories ever. What happened next? The miners turned into famous figures around the world. Some people wrote books. Some met presidents. One ran for a position in government. And the mining company? Let's just say the lawsuits came in quicker than the rescue capsule was brought up. People who commit acts of terror should understand that taking Israeli citizens is a very bad choice. But in 1976, a group of them chose to try it out anyway. Let's just say things didn't turn out great for them. So here's what happened. On June 27th, 1976, an Air France flight left Tel Aviv on its way to Paris. Everything was okay until some hijackers with big ideas and poor career choices chose to change the flight's path to Entebbe, Uganda. Yep, Uganda. When organizing a big hostage situation, why not bring your hostages to a remote airport controlled by a dictator? The hijackers, a blend of Palestinian and German terrorists, believed they were playing a game of chess. Israel was having fun with 4D laser tag. The terrorists had 102 hostages and Idi Amin, Uganda's crazy leader, with them. Israel had a top-notch military, anger, and plenty of time for careful actions. For a week, the terrorists stayed at Entebbe airport, feeling really strong. They asked for the release of prisoners and thought Israel would give in, just like others have before. Sadly for them, Israel doesn't believe in giving in. Rather than talking things over, the Israelis quietly organized one of the most incredible rescue missions ever. On the night of July 3rd, 1976, a group of Israeli commandos packed 4 Hercules planes, flew 2,500 miles without being seen, and landed at Entebbe airport like it was just another day in the job. They even brought a black Mercedes to pretend to be part of Idi Amin's group. What came next was an hour and a half of non-stop excitement. The Israelis arrived, firing their weapons, and in no time, terrorists began to fall. The people being held? Saved. The bad guys? Done for good. Everything happened so quickly and precisely that by the time the Ugandan soldiers understood what was going on, it was already done. By July 4th, 1976, all 102 hostages were safely back home, and Israel had shown everyone why they should be taken seriously. At the same time, Idi Amin found himself alone in an empty airport, puzzled about how a group of commandos had managed to carry out this whole military operation. The whale rescue of 1988. In October 1988, 3 whales found themselves stuck in a tight spot in the Arctic, and everyone went crazy over it. These gray whales got stuck under thick Arctic ice near Point Barrow, Alaska, and had no way to get out. They were really close to making one wrong choice and turning into frozen whale treats. Usually, nature would just have gone on as usual, but this time people chose to step in, because if there's one thing we enjoy, it's making an animal problem into a big event for everyone to see. Since the whales couldn't swim under the ice all the time, someone had the smart idea of making breathing holes in the ice. This meant people now had to cut big holes in the frozen land in very cold weather while trying to stay safe themselves. It was a tough situation, but the whales seemed thankful. At least, that's what we think, since they used each new hole to breathe instead of drowning. But this was the time of the Cold War, and what's a good animal rescue without some political drama? Welcome to the Soviet Union. Yeah, that's right, America and the USSR paused their tensions for a moment and joined forces to assist some whales. The Soviets used an icebreaker ship to clear a way to open water, showing that sometimes a big force is needed to solve a problem. After weeks of tiring, ice-breaking, hole-making chaos, 2 of the whales finally understood and swam to freedom. And the third one? Well, look at the bright side. 2 out of 3 is pretty good, especially when it comes to whales that didn't know how to steer clear of an ice trap to begin with. Next up, we got Harrison Okene's underwater survival. May 26, 2013. Harrison, a cook on a Nigerian tugboat, was just taking care of his own things in the bathroom when the boat unexpectedly turned over and sank 100 feet to the bottom of the ocean. There were 12 crew members on the ship, 11 died, leaving poor Harrison behind. Harrison, on the other hand, had the special survival experience by getting stuck in an air pocket. His new house, a dark, inverted metal box filled with cold water, floating bits, and whatever creatures like to linger in deep-sea wrecks, for 3 days. By now, everyone had given up on the crew. Help teams weren't arriving, search teams were fed up. After being underwater for so long, everyone thought they would only find bodies. When a deep-sea diver went down there with a camera hoping to find bodies, he was really surprised when one of the dead guys grabbed him. The diver almost had a heart attack because nothing in his training book talked about ghosts grabbing your hand 100 feet under the sea. When he realized it was a real person, he and the other members of the rescue team needed to find a way to bring Harrison back to the surface safely. After 3 days of breathing high-pressure air, he couldn't just swim back up. So they put him in a diving helmet, filled it with oxygen, and carefully brought him up to the surface with a decompression chamber. Because if they didn't, his blood would become a bubble-filled mess. And guess what? He survived. After getting through a shipwreck, spending 3 days in the dark, seeing things that weren't there, feeling really cold, and almost being thought of as a zombie, Harrison did what anyone would do. He never worked on a boat again. The El Chapo tunnel escape. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was a lot of things. A drug lord, a master of escape, and apparently the owner of a secret subway system. On July 11th, 2015, El Chapo was put in Mexico's safest prison, Altiplano, a place made just to keep him there. The government had more guards, security cameras, motion sensors, and a general let's not lose the most wanted drug lord again mindset. It didn't make a difference. That night, the cameras in his cell showed him walking to a shower and then disappearing. Just gone, completely vanished. So what happened was El Chapo's team had taken months to dig a tunnel that was a mile long, right under his cell. It wasn't just any tunnel. It had lights, airflow, and even a motorcycle set up on tracks. Why run away on foot when you can ride out of jail? As the prison guards stood by, trying to understand how their most famous inmate had managed to disappear in such a crazy way, El Chapo was racing through an actual underground tunnel to escape. When the authorities discovered the tunnel entrance, it appeared more like a fancy underground hideout than a simple escape path. And the way out was a building site more than a mile away where his team was ready to pick him up and hide him before anyone noticed. The Mexican government, naturally, got really worried. The whole country was now in a "where is El Chapo" mode, while he was enjoying some tequila in a secret spot. Sadly for him, his freedom didn't stick around. Not long after, Mexican officials found him and put him back in jail. And this time they made sure there were no tunnels, no shower tricks, and no motorcycles. Let's talk about the moment the SAS chose to show some Sierra Leonean rebels why taking hostages was not a smart job choice. It all began in August 2000, when a group of aspiring warlords called the West Side Boys, yes, that was really their name, and yes, it sounds like a not-so-successful 90s boy band, thought it would be a great idea to kidnap 11 British soldiers. These rebels, who had spent years causing trouble in Sierra Leone, thought that taking some foreign hostages would help them gain an advantage. They were wrong. The British government, really caring about its soldiers, wasn't interested in talking. While the West Side Boys were having a wild time drinking, using drugs, etc., the UK sent in the SAS and the Paras, A mix that has never turned out well for those on the other side. Enter Operation Barris. On September 10th, 2000, the SAS arrived in helicopters. They rushed into the jungle camp, shooting their guns, moving through the rebels smoothly, taking them out one by one. The fight was quick, harsh, and very unfair. In just a short time, half the rebel camp was either dead, caught, or confused about how their jungle fun trip had turned into a movie where they were the background characters getting taken out too early on. The people being held were all safe, and the fighters were just pissed. It's a short story, but just so epic. The Miracle on Everest. Mount Everest, the world's most risky tourist spot, had another close call in May 2006, when Australian climber Lincoln Hall chose to see how far human survival could go before nature fought back. Surprise, it hit really hard. Hall made it to the top, which is awesome, but there's a small thing to remember. Climbing Everest is just part of it. Getting back down is the tough part. At 26,000 feet above sea level, in a place named the Death Zone, the human body really struggles. Hall's body wasn't fine. At some point, he lost touch with reality, began seeing things that weren't there, talking gibberish, and overall behaving like someone who'd celebrated a bit too much in a situation where fun could lead to serious trouble. His team, after many tries to bring him back, had to make the hardest decision. They left him behind, saying he was gone. Because let's face it, nobody stays at 26,000 feet overnight and comes back to share the story. But Lincoln Hall did. The next morning, a different group of climbers discovered him sitting there, alive, not dead, and completely out of his mind. He didn't have any gloves or oxygen and was behaving like he'd just gotten up from a nap in the worst spot ever. Rescuing someone at that height is not a simple walk in the park. The air is so light that people can hardly stay alive, much less carry a grown man down a dangerous icy path. The rescue team brought Hall down the mountain, which took more than 12 hours. After a tough climb down, Hall returned to base camp. His survival was so unlikely that even the climbers who thought he was gone were completely amazed. Next time someone says they had a tough day, just remind them about Lincoln Hall. He actually died on Everest, came back to life, and greeted his rescuers. Insane. Anyway, YouTube thinks that you'll like this video next, so click it. And if you made it to the end, subscribe.